Good day, everybody. Thanks for attending. It's a bit of a mouthful, that title. I don't know if I could repeat that back, actually.
Oh, I did quite well, didn't I?
You did very well. So, look, this presentation is essentially from the perspective of somebody who has come in at startup stage, and really my experiences, my perspective from growing, helping growing a business. If I give you some context on myself, that's my name, that's the title of the presentation. I've actually exited Purple Bricks after 6.5 years, and I'm currently, at the whims of my wife and kids at home, and also doing a bit of self-investment in terms of doing events like this and doing some other work. But I want to move the slide forward, not backwards. Yeah. Did I mention I'm a CTO as well? So that one, thank you. So just quickly, so the structure of this talk is going to be around who I am, set a bit of context, and then from my perspective, the three cornerstones of success in terms of the journey that I've been on. I don't think any of it's going to be new to this audience, but it's a personal perspective and it's a blend of what I've experienced. So to give you an idea of the last 6.5 years, I mean, I've spent 25 years in the industry, but I want to focus on the last 6.5 years in terms of Purple Bricks. So 2012, I joined as a CTO. It was a very bootstrapped, small company with no MVP, 7 people in the organization. I was the first technologist and CTO. 2004, we did a regional launch into an area of the UK. I had 7 people in my team at that point. 2015, we had become nationwide across the UK, and an IPO at the end of December, just 18 months after initial launch. 2016, we went to the other side of the planet and decided to launch in Australia, and that was a team size of 34 people. Fast forward 12 months, and we did a US launch, approximately 76 people, and then on exit, a team of about 150 across six locales, 6 countries. And to explain what Purple Bricks is, I mean, in terms of brand awareness, has anybody heard of Purple Bricks here? So we've got some ITV listeners and viewers. So Purple Bricks was a disruptor in the real estate market in terms of taking the buying, selling, letting, renting of property to the next level. So an evolution from Rightmove or Zoopla, where you would then engage traditional high street agencies, using technology, real people, and of course marketing to provide a transparent digital experience in that space. So I'm going to whiz through some of these slides. I think the most compelling part might be questions at the end, because it's a very generalist talk around the experience. So, it's a statistic that the industries that we know and love and have grown up with are ever changing. We've got many examples there, and Netflix and Blockbuster and so forth. We've heard it all before. We're in a situation where software is eating the world in terms of the way that applications are being built, in terms of new uses for those technologies across multiple industries. And it's not just these upstarts or these punk rockers in terms of creating something from scratch. It's every company is now a software company, and the fact is that large enterprises like Ford and the other examples on the screen there are catching up. They're looking to replicate and enhance and change the mentality, particularly for software delivery. The way that we, in Purple Bricks looked at digital transformation. Well, there was no digital transformation. We were starting from zero, you know, we built that into our processes, our ways of working from very early on, with a constant loop of engagement, particularly with customers, but also with employees, which I'll come on to. So this is all just context that I want to get past, and this is the earth-shattering secret sauce. I mean, there is no secret sauce. You know, sauce is a recipe. My recipe happens to be pretty straightforward, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't taste great. I mean, yeah, kill me now for that pun, but the secret sauce is it's got to be people first. So the success that we've had as an organization, going from you know, a privately owned company to a company worth 1.5 billion at one point, it all people-centric. So it's really, for me, humanizing that technology and the organization. We talked a lot about culture this morning in the opening keynote, and I was nodding my head, and some of what we said is, you know, in the next few slides. And then, you know, ways of working. I prefer not to call it process. That sometimes infers bureaucracy and you know, corporate mentality. But we all need some ways of working, some methods, and some models of working. And over the 6 years in Purple Bricks, it became a very different place to work, as you can imagine. So, you know, there's a lot of chaotic working practices in the early days, but that's not a bad thing. I think my attitude to that was to really let the madness reign, and then rein in the madness over time. I think I'm reasonably unique in terms of I built the MVP with my team. You know, IPO'd and you know, went international and re-platformed for scale as well in that journey. So actually created legacy code, and then tried to untangle that. And really, technology for me is the last point in terms of an order of priority. I'm a technologist at heart, but it's the people that you've got to get on board, and it's the people that create the technologies and all the digital apps and experiences that we use today. Look, we had the culture talk in the morning. I actually gave this, I read off this line for my presentation, and I think John asked, was it from Wikipedia? It might be from Wikipedia, but I think it's the simplest definition that I could come up with in terms of that shared value and shared goals. That is something that we did at Purple Bricks from the early days. We lived a common goal, and you know, that begins with the people. This is a slide from Carol S. Decker. I think I'm pronouncing that right, from her book Mindset. And I think if you're going to war, like we effectively were in some ways, we're going to war against the traditional online estate agency. We went to war in the UK, in Australia, and in America, where you know, they put up a good fight. You need people that fundamentally have a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset, so they can challenge themselves and people around them, and you know, there isn't just one solution. There's a spectrum of options that they can take. They believe that they can improve. It's a mantra that we had in Purple Bricks, where we continuously change and evolve and improve processes. You know, the ability then to convert the setbacks into future successes. So that whole stereotype of being able to fail, and we failed a lot in Purple Bricks, and there's micro and there's macro failures. But you know, these two things, I think, were the I looked for in every hire that I brought into the organisation. I'm whipping through these slides because I have a history of talking for hours, particularly before a lunch. So again, teamwork, we talked about that this morning, and a common goal. Great teams are the difference between quitting and then going out again for a second go. We really, the best of times were when we were making launches into new regions, into new countries. Very often the TV adverts would be booked in, which was a heavy part of our marketing strategy. So we had a fixed deadline to achieve that. We had the sort of culture where people didn't necessarily have to have paid overtime. It was a collaborative environment, and I think a large part of that is bringing in engineering folk into the process. Very easy when we had an office, 1/5 the size of this, but very difficult when we've got headquarters in Irvine and in Birmingham and across the world. But if you don't involve, I'm preaching to the converted, no doubt, but if you bring your smart engineering folk into that process with the business and have a seamless team rather than a silo, that's the foundation of what we're doing, and that sense of mastery and purpose as well. I love that quote and it works with the Purple Bricks thing as well, where people laying bricks won't necessarily be inspired, but if you tell them they're building a cathedral, then it's more intrinsic to the motivation. I hugely believe in happiness. People sometimes sneer at me and have a laugh in terms of how I go on about happiness and about just enjoying the process every single day. Every team that I've been involved in as a leader has been one where there's laughs, there's a focus on doing serious work with a happy face, and coming out of that, then there's the good growth and mastery as well, which we touched on in the previous slides. So if you can really inspire people on a common goal, it was in some ways easy in Purple Bricks in terms of changing in industry. We had lots of detractors, lots of some mudslinging and watchdog and things like that, where we could go back to that, the setbacks making you a bit stronger. Hugely important where the expectations from the business are aligned with the development teams. That's just obvious, but just because it's obvious, it doesn't always happen. Managing the process, not the people, that's key. And as I scaled teams and became unable to have direct reports of 100 people, putting in soft layers of management, and not indoctrinating, but training, coaching, that we want people to have accountability and to have autonomy and to in some ways manage upwards. So the development managers, the team leads should manage the process, not the people, not feeding people requirements and augmenting that. Ideas to market process, again, huge. As we scaled, we encountered many dysfunctions in that, actually, because the lack of process gets to you in the end. So yeah, really important to have that. And then I'll end this section about people with a quote, and if I paraphrase it, it's from one of our senior engineers, where sometimes the perception working for a startup is losing your life, and you're really working tireless hours and not necessarily seeing any payback. But that autonomy and that mastery and that sense of autonomy can really fuel teams to build amazing software. It all contributes to happiness as well. I then want to just talk in terms of ways of working. So we were lucky having a blank canvas in some ways, but the experience I've had prior to Purple Bricks really was this sort of siloed operational camps where you've got the development and the operations, and you've got that friction between the two. And in fact, down the middle, you've got this thing called the chasm of despair, where really things fall down that crack. And you don't have that cadence of delivery that the likes of Amazon, who deploy, I think, every 11.5 seconds, a significant piece of code. So really, I'm going to use a universal, recognizable terminology in terms of DevOps, but it's just a way to classify, my experience. And DevOps it's not all about the happiness. It's about, delivering business outcomes, getting faster, hopefully without breaking too much things. And again, that continuous delivery that we aspire to have in terms of planning and tracking, developing and testing, releasing, and then monitoring and learning from those releases. And what are the outcomes? So the outcomes, as identified by, I think it was McKinsey or maybe Gardner recently, is in terms of the increased revenue, which is certainly CFO friendly, faster time to market, which really, gives a delightful, hopefully, experience to your customers, and all the good things that I'm sure a lot of us appreciate in this room. So we've looked at, the people element, which, is usually important. We've looked at the ways of working. And then, the technology that leverages that. We as an organization went directly into the cloud. We engaged with Microsoft in 2012, went into Azure, which was, only incorporated about 2009. So we didn't have this legacy, which I know from talking to many of you, you're quite envious around it because just before coming in here, I talked to somebody around how a lot of their role is incorporating, talking to people, changing mindsets, and so forth. We were lucky, obviously, that we were cloud born in the cloud. But today's IT reality is cloud native. It is being born in the cloud. It is using orchestration of cloud technologies, containerization, serverless technology, and microservices. And of course, the AI element that we've looked at in talks this morning as well. I've made many mistakes, and as an organization, we've made many mistakes. I mean, we started out building a monolith, and that was probably still the right thing to do because we had a small team and we were pivoting requirements every single day, every single night, looking for a MVP to take us to market. But over time, working on a monolith, one piece of software with lots of dependencies and lots of fragility to changes, doesn't scale well. Doesn't scale well in terms of people, technology, or ways of working. When we went into the United States, and presently we have more global hits than Rightmove and Zoopla. I say we. I don't work for Purplebricks anymore, but and we have more properties because it's a buy and sell side market in the States. So hugely important to actually re-platform for scale. So I've been on a journey of breaking down the monolith piece by piece and transforming parts of the platform, which was one common code base across the globe. It's not. It's a challenging ecosystem. There is many parts. It's not a panacea or a silver bullet, but it does lend itself to huge velocity gains, and I've seen that in terms of having 10 or 12 development squads and comparing the guys that are working on the monolith to the new re-architect pieces in React and in serverless and Microsoft technology, and it really indoctrinates a sense of ownership from conception through to production and afterwards to monitor and service the production code. So just on Kubernetes and containers, Kubernetes is gaining enormous traction. We've been using Kubernetes for about 3 years, and I've seen the adoption of that from a personal and looking at the industry as well, and containers as well. So that our ability to isolate and have discrete pieces of your application in one box that is replicable and deployable to production, that doesn't have an impact and doesn't have a regression testing penalty. That just gives you an enormous amount of fluidity in delivery. But again, it isn't without its overhead. And I think some of the companies that do Kubernetes well, and I've heard it say in talks like this, that it's been held together by a group or even one or two really smart individuals who know what they're doing across the stack. But we're getting to a point where we've got a form of AI and a form of orchestration and automation coming into that technology. And this is my take on where we've went to, and I think it's banging the drum for AI again, but that AI is going to be invaluable, and particularly in deploying the DevOps space where there's a huge amount of configuration and manual effort required in containers, in Kubernetes, in microservices, but there's an emerging, hopefully, space where that's going to be automated and using AI to further automate beyond manual configuration. So to summarize, it's pretty apparent that digital transformation is changing everything. For me, it's the combination of the people first and foremost, the ways of working, and lastly, which is somewhat controversial as a CTO, but lastly, technology. You just can't underestimate the power of mutual respect and, like I said, happiness in that teamwork, and it really gives, I believe, a massive competitive advantage. I've worked in government, I've worked in public and private sector. I've worked in 5 startups before. Most of those weren't as successful as Purple Bricks. Maybe one was considered a success. The others were not. But the common thread running through that is that mutual respect and teamwork. Really, start with the people, work on the mindset. Easy for me to say as a tech founder of a startup, but that's my take on it. And it's continuous, so it doesn't really work for me if you don't have that CI, that continuous integration, that continuous deployment, where you've got the tools that are delivering continuous improvements, the processes, but also the mindset that is looking for that continuous marginal gains, to really iterate on that. And like culture, it should be evolutionary. I believe it should grow day on day, week on week. That's it. So thank you very much. I really welcome any questions, because it's been a mile wide and an inch deep. So. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think in some ways the monolith it was almost unconscious. Could call that unconscious incompetence. But it was, it was dealing with, some fantastic founders who've got to be applauded, but they weren't necessarily, they weren't technologists. And the expectations were huge for a launch. And every day was a different iteration of product, small team. And I think, in some ways, if we'd started with a microservices architecture, which was reasonably new for the time, but it would have slowed us down because 2012, 2013, there wasn't the same noise around that, wasn't the same community around that. And, just putting those in place probably wouldn't have got us to market, as quickly as we did. And to take the second question rather, how, it was very much a hugely fast-paced business, and the journey from monolith to microservices had to be steeped in commercial realism. Look, as CTO, I didn't want to deliver some software that would just fall to bits when Strictly Come Dancing came on with an advert. And in the United States, which the scale of that was frightening in some ways, because when we launched in the UK, we spent an all-nighter actually, and we all started looking at the Google Analytics the next day. There was 7 people on the website, and we thought, what's going on? We had 25 properties when we went live in the UK, and I remember we made the page size. I think we made it 3, so we had, looked like we had more pages, more properties. But when we launched in the United States, for example, we launched in just one state in California, and instantly 150,000 properties next day, because it's it's a buy and sell market where you can make a cut from other estate agencies' properties. So there's just fundamentals that had to be re-architected for scale, and search being one of those. So it's difficult. It's storytelling. It's conversations. It's lots of arguments, lots of discussion around what do we do, and it's that pragmatic approach where you need what's going to make the difference. What do we need to perform well? Yeah. Radical candor, which is something the Americans like to talk about. I think having that trust in the room, and that accountability as well, so that you've got a direct approach. So it was always a direct communication style. I think fundamentally at its root, that's what we were not afraid to have difficult conversations. In the vein of still being respectful, but wanting to progress the idea, the person, the process, whatever it was, forward. Easy for me to stand up and talk about that on stage, but that's kind of what it was really, in many ways. Any other questions?
You talk very much from a startup perspective about clean sheets of paper. How do you change an existing monolithic organisation that maybe isn't used to that? Particularly, you even mentioned about the founders of Purple Bricks having a mindset. How do you change the leadership mindset to accept this way of working?
It's a good question. I don't know if I know the answer to that. I've not been through that journey. I could only imagine that walking into an organisation with a different mindset in terms of, and a different legacy as well, right? Because with the best will in the world, you're not just going to walk in there and say, everybody have a growth mindset, be happy, and we'll get stuff done. It's hugely complex. But you start looking at what are the problems, I suppose. So what problem am I solving, and work from there really in terms of, and then that sort of toe in the water approach as well. We did that with the journey from monolith to microservices, where we couldn't obviously park the business, take all 4 tires off the vehicle and put it up on cement bricks. We had to keep things running, and we had to continuously improve our product. So I think identifying the problem, take some small bits, work on that, make that a success, and then iterate from that. So it's really an agile process rather than just a waterfall. approach. That's my view. Great, thank you very much. If there's no other questions, I'll go and have a sit down. Thank you.